group is mortgage markets. The second group I called, let's see, Crystal, Ismail, Jay. And
we'll pass. Can we get it?
sorry about that. We will learn about that last, but you should still have time in between that class and the presentation. So,
Foreign exchange.
foreign exchange. You got it on camera.
Yeah.
And then, pardon?
Foreign
the,
exchange.
second to last group I called that. Yep. Fabian, you guys got bond markets?
Bond market?
Bond markets, yep. And corporate and government bond markets, but I'll give you the full rubrics later. And then the last group I called is stock markets.
don't know why that was
that
funny.
actually should be the hardest. But so you guys got 4 people.
What about the foreign exchange?
Exactly. You guys tell me, and I'll tell you first. But I'll give you guys rubrics a little later.
So it's the recent 2008?
Yes, the Great Recession, yep. So it's going to be how each of these markets was impacted and was impacted during the Great Recession on a global scale. Okay.
In your Great Recession, you're talking, what, he said the 2008?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Still, I don't have enough lights. Why is this?
There's 2 that are out.
No, I think the switch is.
You open the blind.
No, I saw them turn them on, off and on, and they both flickered.
Yeah. I'll deal with it. Can you guys see the board all right?
Yeah.
Look at the blind.
No blinds? All right.
What color is it?
Classes now.
Question is, can I open the blinds?
Ah, the light.
Yes.
That's good.
Children
Okay,
of the
yeah.
sun.
All right.
You can see the light.
Ruben, you all right? Or is one
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Okey doke. So, today we got a couple problems on the agenda, and we also, and yeah, we're also going to do an amortization table. So, let's talk about some relevant things to talk about. Well, actually, first, let's talk about interest rates. So, this was a source of confusion during the bonds homework, and here I get to explain to you exactly why you might have been confused. So, imagine we have 2 instruments. One that pays 12%, another that pays 11.5%.
We're doing it.
Pretty wrong. Yeah. Now, it seems like an obvious question if I were to ask you which of these will give you more money. But we need to hesitate before answering that question because we need to factor in how frequently interest is compounded. Okay? So, for instance, we have 2 instruments. One where 12% interest rate compounded annually.
Daily.
You read my mind here. So this 12% interest rate is compounded annually. This 11.5% interest rate is compounded daily. How do we figure out which one pays you more money?
We use a formula.
Yes, Sam was going to walk us through the formula.
I don't know the formula. I just know there is a
All
formula.
right.
It's been so long since I did that.
Foreign exchange, and I will reinvest it back into that interest rate. So if we have quarterly compounding at a 10% annual interest rate, that means every quarter the bank pays me 2.5% on my money, hands me that sum. So if I started with $100, now I have $102.50. I hand it immediately back to them, and then over the next quarter, they give me 2.5% on the $102.50. So it's not on my initial $100, it's on the new sum. Who did I lose? Anyone? Is this, no? Okay, so with 12% compounded annually, what does this mean? This means I give the bank $100. In a year, they figure out they owe me 12% interest, and they give me $112 back. How about this problem? So I give the bank $100, and every day for 300, let's assume there's 365 days here. For each of 365 days, they give me 11.5 over 365% return. Okay? And then they give that to me on the first day. I reinvest the new sum with the bank, and then they calculate this percentage return on the new sum. And then they give that back to me. And then it's more return. So as you guys can see, the rate grows. And what's the specific formula? Well, it is 1. So this is the formula for what's called the effective annual rate, the EAR. And one of the consumer protection regulations that came out of the financial crisis was that banks had to disclose this effective annual rate. Because what banks were actually doing is disclosing whatever the nominal rate was. But what happens is, if the banks were compounding that rate monthly, which is what the usual practice on mortgages, it's always going to turn out to be more than the annual rate. And so who has done this calculation for 11.5%? Sam, what do you got?
Oh, no, I haven't done it for the 11.5, but I've done it before.
Okay.
I thought that's what you were gonna ask.
Okay, fair enough. Has anyone done this calculation for the 11.5%? And if not, could somebody please do it? 0.03151. I don't believe that should be the case. So
12.1853.
what is it?
12.1853.
Okay, let me do it.
Years calculator.
So
Yeah.
what's our R going to be here?
I gotta buy a new calculator.
1.115.
0.115, and we divide that by 365. So what's that? You said all that? Yeah, but for some reason the number turned out not the one I wanted. You add 1 to it. You raise it to the 365th power. Yeah, okay. You said it, you're right, sorry. For some reason I thought it was higher. But yeah, so it turns out to be, once we plug this number into here, turns out to be 12.18%. And this is the trend. Any number that's going to be compounded more frequently is going to be a higher effective annual rate than a number that's compounded less frequently, given the same sum. This is because at every compounding date, so if it's quarterly, then 4 times a year. If it's daily, then 365 times a year. They give you the money back, you give it back to them, and the new interest is earned on the higher principal. Does that make sense? So 11.5% compounded daily will actually earn you more money than 12% compounded annually. So we know a little bit about how compounding works, and we can move on to, there's a step between here and mortgages. Okay, so now let's talk about actually we'll talk about that first. Sorry. All right, now let's do mortgage exempt. Yes. Are there any questions about how compounding works or what compounding is? By the way, the first group that I assigned to you guys gets Elizabeth too. I forgot about her. She's not here. But what's that?
That should trade in stock markets.
Well, the stock market is the last group.
Yeah,
Well,
that's us.
Yeah.
that means one of you guys would have to exit stock markets. Because we can't give her to exit stock markets. We can't punish her. Okay. So, this is a multi-part problem, and the first part I should hope you'll be able to get. But, let's say a borrower borrows $100,000.
This is a mortgage problem?
Yes. I can write it. Borrower asks for $100,000 from the bank, and he's got two options. He can either get this $100,000 and pay no points, and pay a 12% interest rate, or he can pay 2 points and pay an 11.5% interest rate. And so we're going to calculate which one of these is more lucrative, which one the borrower should want. Okay. Pardon?
You might answer this.
Okay. So this mortgage is going to be a typical mortgage for 30 years. And how many periods are we going to be working with 30 years?
60.
Who said that?
60, right?
30 years?
Very
No, not semi-annual, monthly. I'm sorry, I should have made that clear. So, yes, 360. So. It's fully amortizing, so what does that mean? Yes, at the end of the life of the instrument, there's going to be a balance of 0 remaining. Okay?
30 years. And times 12. Months in a year.
So which input is that going to affect? Future value. And what's the input going to be?
0.
Exactly. Okay, so now how do we figure out the payment?
Put it into the formula you showed.
The formula I showed you.
Okay.
So how do we figure out the payment? Well, we have some inputs, and they look like they're familiar. What would these inputs represent? We've got a future value on here. We got an N on here. What other information? What's that?
You got a present value.
Where's the present value?
The borrowing.
Yeah, exactly. That's how much you get today, $1,000. Future value is 0, so all we're looking for is payment. So once somebody runs that calculation, we get a payment of. Sorry, Jay, I'll never doubt you again if you run the calculation.
We're doing the no points at 12%?
Yes, we're doing the no points 12% right now. I'm sorry, I should have clarified. Yes, that's the key I'm missing here.
We're saying the 12% is the effective annual rate?
12% is the annual rate. It's not the effective annual rate. So what we plug into our calculator is not the effective annual rate. What we plug into our calculator is this base rate, this nominal rate. But what borrowers are actually paying on their mortgage is an effective annual rate. And in fact, we can calculate that.
So since it's an annual rate, isn't that the effective annual rate?
It's not exactly, so this is what it will show you when, for instance, when a bank tells you that, hey, you can get a mortgage with us for 6%. That's going to be this rate. That does not answer the question of what are you actually paying. Because what you're actually paying, to answer that question, you need to consider interest on interest, periodic compounding. So within a year, you'd actually be paying. So this is going to come out to be.
Doesn't seem like it.
So your effective annual rate, what you're actually paying per year, is 12.68%, which is more than 12. But this is not the input to our present value problem.
So
Okay?
the answer 12K.
No, the answer is not 12K. So
Yeah.
divide the year by, at least 12, or depending on how many payments? you'll-
Divide what by 12?
The 12 by 12?
Yes.
Because you have, I mean, assuming that, you
This is
didn't
an
tell us,
annual
but
rate.
we're assuming payments are made monthly.
Yes, and I did tell you indirectly, in answering Ruben's question, although, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you, Ruben gave me a reasonable answer, but I forgot to tell you that it wasn't the right answer, so in mortgages, in home loan mortgages, payments are made monthly.
1,028.
1,028.
61.
Okay. More reasonable, right? It's better if you make mistakes. Okay, but there's a different question. How much money are you giving to the bank over the course of this instrument?
Multiply that payment by 360.
Yeah. What does that come out to?
300.
370,000.
So to borrow $100,000 from the bank, you have to give them back $370,000. That's how interest on interest works.
Can you run me by 1,028 one more time?
Sure. So we do a present value calculation with 100,000 as the present value, a 360 as the number of periods. I over Y is 12 divided by 12% divided by 12. Sorry, that was my mistake. I labeled this incorrectly. But the periodic annual rate is 1%.
So we would end up paying, they said 300
70,000 to borrow 100,000
in 1 year.
In 30 years.
over the course. Yes. So 360 payments
Okay.
of 1,028 ends up at 370.
I was still on that.
Oh, and that's not including your insurance.
Yeah, we won't work with insurance in this example, but that's also relevant. But not everybody has to get
Over
insurance.
30 years.
But
Yeah, if you're paying on a house, you have to get insurance.
everybody has to get private mortgage insurance. Is it the same
No,
law?
PMI is different than
Okay, are you talking about flood?
house insurance, like hazard insurance.
Yeah, so everybody has to get flood insurance.
Hmm.
Okay.
Unless you own the house.
What's that?
Unless you own the house.
Yeah, if you own a house, you don't have to get anything, because you're only imposing the risk on yourself, but you still probably should.
Which you obviously won't for 30 years if you're making a payment on it.
But it's interesting to note that the average mortgage is paid off in 7 years, because of refinancing and everything, because of prepayment. Sam?
Oh, no, I was gonna say, that's why I'm a firm believer, you can't afford to finance a house for $15,000, and for 15 years, you can't afford that house. That's my theory. Because, the interest is so crazy, and you're gonna end up paying so much for the home. You should downgrade. I think stretching notes out for 30K, for 30 years,
I'll point out though is that.
But for
all
credit
credit-
reasons, it's good to show that you've made payments for that lengthy amount of time.
30 years.
Hmm.
But yeah.
The longer you make payments on something and yeah.
But okay, so this all depends on the individual person, his or her risk tolerances, his or her preferences, so that's not something I can teach you in the class, unfortunately. But Sam's got an opinion, it might be the right one, I'll leave it up to you guys to assess. Okay, now let's consider the case of what would happen if you paid 2 points. Okay? So, this
Now,
is.
2 points, you mean 2 points before the fire amount?
Yes, before
So
the.
then you're putting $2,000 down on 100,000, so you're only financing 98.
No. It seems like that would be reasonable, but that's not how it works for some reason.
So you're still financing the 1,000?
So, it's easier if I explain to you based on the inputs, okay? So, number of periods obviously doesn't change. This carries over. Your interest rate changes. Your present value doesn't change. When you're calculating your payment, okay? Still fully amortizing. Pardon?
I wonder why the present value just keep going.
It will. It's just a multi-step thing. So, face value still equals 0. Our new interest rate, because of this agreement, was 11.5%.
Divided by 12.
Yep, and so, okay, so to get your payments, you're gonna calculate your payments as if you were still borrowing this 100,000. Okay, so what's my payment gonna come up to be?
990.29.
Yes.
But the 2,000 just up front,
Yes.
so then it's really irrelevant.
It is relevant for the second step of this calculation.
Of how much total you're paying?
So,
Right, so we do one.
You didn't say how many were, how many 2 points, which was what, 1,000 each?
yes,
Okay.
points are 1,000 each.
Okay.
So, this answers the question of what your payment is, okay? The next question is, what is the actual interest rate you're paying, given these payments for these terms and what you actually financed instead of what you used to calculate the payment, okay? So what we, all right, so let's stop here. This,
So you change PD to 90.
yes, exactly, yes.
So I can only skip the step of like multiplying it by 360 and you're better off by, I guess, close to 14,000 just by putting 2,000 down and getting a lower rate. But then,
Yes, so what you're saying, so you calculated how much money you'll be paying to the bank total?
So it's to see if your benefit of putting that down was enough to cover the, I guess, overall 2,000.
Yes. But that calculation doesn't take into account this 2,000.
Okay.
Because here's why, Tim. This money that you're paying, this outflow, is very difficult to interpret because it takes place over 360 periods. In each one of those periods, you have to discount that payment by a different rate, by a different number of n. And so you can't compare the payment in 287 month to the payment in the 4th month. The present value of the $2,000 that you lose is $2,000 because that takes place today. So you can't simply subtract the $2,000 from that lump sum because it's not an apples to apples comparison. So do we want to explain that a little better or do we want to focus to this? Does anyone? Okay, we'll get to that momentarily. I'd be happy to re-explain it, but let's just finish this part of the problem, okay? So what we did in the first step was calculate how much our payment is. Now we need to ask ourselves, given that this is the payment, how much is our real interest rate? Okay, and our real interest rate is going to be a factor of how much we really get out, how much we really borrow. So it's not going to be this 100,000. That's going to be 98,000. Okay, so in that case, the real interest rate that we're paying is not going to be this 11.25 divided by 12. It's going to be something different. So once we plug 98,000 into our calculator, that's going to come up with, and then we solve for the interest rate, that's going to give us what?
So you keep payment as the one you just solved for?
Yes, you keep the payment because those are going to be your actual payments.
360 stays the same too, correct?
Of course, yep.
So we're just,
I think it's 11.76.
11.7. 11.76%. Yeah. Let me check here.
Then you just recalculate the IRY and then multiply by 12.
Let me just make sure I'm getting exactly where you guys are getting.
11.76.
11.7642.
What'd you get, Dylan?
I want to say now.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm looking at a 12.42 number here.
How'd you do
Alright,
it?
alright.
Magic. Let
You
me
got,
double
you
check.
still had 990.29 in for the payment, right?
I want to validate it.
I like how, he doesn't trust us.
Ah,
It's just me, that's what I was gonna say. It's just me.
here we go.
get 11.76?
Yes, okay. So yeah, you're right, you're, whatever you guys got was right, but let's think again. Is this the actual interest rate we're facing, or what we calculated was the interest rate that it's gonna say on the top of our rate sheet? Okay, what the bank is actually gonna offer us. Let's take a step further and figure out our effective annual rate. Because that's the one that we really care about, that's what we need to compare.
So when we plug those numbers in, what did everyone get? 11 what, what's the right answer?
Whatever they said. And so the periodic one was 0.98041, and then you'd multiply that by 12. So
You got 12.47.
one second.
Zero. So just leave it upon itself, you'll see how it works.
You said 11.76?
Yeah.
Okay, so once we solve for this, we get.
Which is the nominal rate?
That's what we're looking for now. Found this, now we're looking for this. I guess you plug this in.
So that's what it will say on your rate sheet.
Right.
Okay? But now let's figure out how much you're actually paying the bank, because those are the numbers that are relevant for you.
So you have to compound it 360 times.
Okay.
Not 360 times, well, you do have to compound it 360 times, that's what you're actually paying over 30 years.
Yeah.
But it's more relevant to look at it over the course of a year.
So,
So what do we do to this number to get to an effective annual rate?
compound it monthly.
Yes. So how do we do that?
Use the thing on the computer.
So for those of us without things or computers, we divide this number by 12. Conversely, we just end up with what we got when we first solved this, right? We multiply by 12, now we divide by 12. And so that equals 0.99804, something like that. And we have to plug this into our EAR formula. Don't worry about the formulas, I'll give it to them. Understand when to apply. I'll give it to you.
Yes, moving forward, will we need to find the effective annual rate on those bumpers?
Yes, you will.
End it that way,
And what?
end it that way when we're, instead of nominal.
Question.
Believe it or not, this is not actually the end of the problem. It's a multi-part problem. Jake.
Would it not be 0.0098?
Yes, it would. Sorry. Guys, you guys have noticed by now for sure that I'm
Up there.
fearless. So whenever you guys think I'm wrong, I'm probably wrong. Bring it up in class, I take no pride.
So that, at the top too needs to be changed?
Doesn't matter, not once or worse. What's that? At the top, this one.
That's what I was missing. I had the right answer.
I can put a 0 here if you want, Jay, but it's a sign.
No, but I'm saying like.
Oh,
0.9%
yeah.
is
Yeah.
0.009.
Exactly.
What?
Yeah. Because 1% is 0.01, so 0.9%.
This is less than 1%.
0.009.
So you're doing 11.76 divided by 12, that's gonna be less than 1%.
Yep.
Then
Okay.
you're turning it into a percentage by rolling it.
Then
into a
you're,
big-
yes.
Turn it into a decimal by,
And then, so to get the actual final percent, you do -1. So let's recap. Okay, when you guys are done punching numbers, we'll recap what we've done so far before we move on to the next steps.
That's a question. Is there a
Yes,
way to
ma'am.
do a little carrot on this thing?
Is there gonna be a
Like
what?
to the 12th power?
There
Instead of
should,
just
yeah.
squared? I've not been able to find the state.
It's y to the x, you have to do it weird, you type in 1 and you type in that and then hit 12.
Yeah, what are the X here?
So you
Whatever
do
it is.
y to the x, type in 1.
I think so.
So let's say you wanna do 4 squared, that's y to the, that's 4, y to the x, 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright.
That's a lot of repetition if you just do it.
Just figure that stupid thing out.
You can do it twice as fast by just hitting the square button all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so to recap, the first question we answered was, how much money would you pay under this no point 12% scenario? And you answered that very simply. The way you've always been doing net present value problems, I give you an annual rate, you have to convert it into a periodic rate. It's fully amortizing, so you know that the face value is 0. Number of periods you know because it's a 30-year mortgage, and periods are months in residential home loan mortgages, and this 100,000 is what you get. You punch all those buttons in, you get a payment of 1028. Okay? That part's simple enough. It gets more complicated. To calculate what your payment is under the point scenario, 2 points, 11.5% scenario, okay? You forget about the points for the first step. Say you borrowed 100,000 bucks, same amount of period, same face value, new discount rate or new interest rate, and you calculate the payment. This is what your actual payment will be if you pay points. To calculate what your interest rate will be, you change this present value to be $98,000 because that's the true sum that you borrowed from the bank after netting out the points. Okay? That'll give you your not effective annual rate, your nominal rate. Okay? That'll give you the rate that'll say on the rate sheet. And then at the very bottom of the rate sheet, it'll say effective annual rate, EAR. To calculate that, well, I'm sorry, first, this will give you 1/12 of that rate. To get the annual rate, you multiply this by 12, okay? To calculate the EAR, you divide it by 12 again, so you get your periodic rate, and you do this periodic compounding formula. Okay, so it compounds 12 times in a year. So, Sam.
Is there any way you could put this problem like on a piece of paper and send it to us on an email?
Absolutely
Like
not.
step by step?
It's on the book.
It is?
Yes. And you have your notes, so you should be able to follow along. It's in the
So
book.
what exactly is the EAR difference from the actual rate?
So, in this case, we're gonna get an EAR of 12.42. Yeah? Good job, guys, okay? And our actual, no, the EAR is the actual rate. This is the more real of the two rates.
So the real rate that we got, that 11.76 is what?
This is a nominal rate.
It's a nominal rate.
Jay.
I don't think you have to divide it by 12. Oh,
No,
I was
the-
dividing it by 12 again, okay.
The output of the calculator is gonna be this 0.9804 number,
Right, so you
okay?
put that in.
To get to an annual rate, you have to multiply this by 12.
Yeah.
To do the EAR, you don't need this intermediate step. You don't need to get the annual
Okay.
rate.
But if you were just taking the nominal rate, and putting it straight into the formula.
You divide by 12.
Okay. I was doing it twice and that's what was off.
So you're saying that with this 2 points down and at 11.5%, you're actually paying 12.42%?
Yes. So your EAR in this case is 12.42%. How does that compare with your EAR in the other case? I did it quickly and erased it, so let's recalculate. All right, why don't you guys walk me through the formula? What am I gonna write down?
For what?
Wrong. First, open parentheses. 1 plus
12 or 12.
What's next? Yes.
So 12.68, is that
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Okay.
So that's the cheaper
Or- This is from the first part. This is for the no points scenario, okay?
Yeah,
For the
and
point scenario, we get, as Fabian said, 12.42%.
Okay.
Okay.
So the nominal rates are 11.76 and 12 and 12.42 and 12.6.
Precisely. Did I hear mumbling? Some mumbling, sorry. Okay. Okay, so I will let everyone finish frantically writing before moving on to the next step.
So it's better to take the 2 points.
Yes. But is it? So, just like when you're an investor in bonds, and you need to figure out what your
Only as if
that's another consideration. If you were making over 12% on your bank account, you'd have to tell me where you bank. But if you're getting a mortgage in the first place, chances are you don't have the money. But no, I don't, that's a relevant consideration. But what I was pointing to was that, or I was beginning to point to, was that just like when you're an investor in bonds, that are callable, and you anticipate that the bond will be called, the relevant rate for you is not the yield to maturity, but the yield to call. Same scenario for this, okay? But you're in the flip side. Now you're the borrower. So if you're the borrower, the relevant rate for you is, you're very punctual with your nail cutting. It's always Tuesdays and Thursdays.
There's better times to do that.
I bit my nail off, so I had to, because I got a nervous reaction thing.
Okay, I got sidetracked, sorry. So you need to consider your sort of rate to refinance, or rate to sale, or rate to however long you plan on keeping this house, okay? From an investor standpoint, a yield to call is going to be the amount you're gonna make, assuming that this security gets called. From the borrower's perspective, the effective annual rate on this instrument that pays points is going to be a factor of how long you keep this mortgage for. Because, can somebody explain to me why? Ismail, I know you know the answer. What do we have to consider?
I don't know, inflation,
Inflation's a factor.
interest rates going up and down.
Okay, so what we have to consider is the timing of the cash flows. You part with this $2,000 immediately, today, and you're getting the benefit of that sacrifice manifested in a lower rate. You're getting that spread out over 360 periods, okay? If you're not keeping this mortgage for 360 periods, then you're foregoing some of those benefits. Does this make sense? So, all the cost of this point scenario takes place today, but the benefits are spread out over the life of the loan. And so, if the loan lives less long, which is a great alliteration, if the loan has a shorter maturity, then you're not getting the benefits that take place at the very end. Or if you prepay your loan, or if you sell your house, or if you refinance, you're not getting all of these benefits. So you need to take into account how long you plan on keeping the house in order to arrive at your true effective annual rate. And what we'll do next is figure out whether it's worth it to do the points if we keep the house under certain scenarios. So I won't do all the scenarios. I will point to the book, and they calculate some of the scenarios.
So rather than doing a
Yes.
scenario, is there a way to find, I guess, a time period, to solve for the time period to where it wouldn't be?
You're talking about a break-even time period?
Yes, yeah.
There is, I have to think about that. It's gonna be very difficult because it's gonna have to do with 7.68 years. And you're gonna have to convert that into months. And I can probably, that's a really good question. I like those kind of
You
questions.
just solve for n though, right? Or-
Yes, you end up solving for n, but for n. But the thing is, your I over y, it's not going to be as easy as just plugging it into your present value calculations, because your I over y is not like a constant thing. It's going to change every time. So let me table that. Okay, I'll try to get an answer for you. I still owe you guys the answer to 3 questions from last class I haven't written down. So I will write. What will I write? I will write break even. Okay. So if anyone has their book, table 14.2, in part 5, chapter 14, has this problem written out. Now, if you guys are trying to follow the table, this is the typo that I alluded to last time. It said at the very bottom, n equals 360, n should really equal 24 in their prompts, but you guys can talk to me later if you care about that. But this is what your true EAR is, assuming that you hold the house for different periods of time. And the years of payment here are 6, 7, 10, 15, and 30. I'm not gonna go through all of them. I'm just gonna give you a principle, right? So this rate that you got, this 12.42, assumes that you hold that house for 30 years.
What table is that?
14.2. If you were to instead hold that for 10 years instead of 30 years, you would be making 12.52. Now, knowing that information, is it worth your while to get the points or not? So you would be paying 12.52.
No,
No, why is that so?
because it's more than the 12%.
It's 12% is not an EAR. 12% is your nominal rate. We're talking EARs here. 12.52 is the rate you're truly paying the bank, because when we factor in monthly compounding.
It's not the 12.42?
It's not the 12.42 because this assumes that you hold on to the loan for 30 years. If you instead hold on to the loan for 10 years, you are foregoing some of the benefits of the reduced interest rate at the end, and so you still have to pay all the costs of the 2 points today.
It's still better than 12.6.
Yes, it's still better than 12.68, you'd still do it. Now, here's the magic number in mortgages. This is a relevant number for you guys. First of all, may I erase all this?
So the original EAR for no points was what?
Who can answer that question for me?
So would you get more
First,
benefit?
who can answer that question for me?
12.68,
Yes, 12.68, because we plugged it into this formula.
and that's saying what though, that we're getting what from this?
This
We're-
is the.
We're paying the bank
Yes.
12.68% within those 30 years.
No, what this is saying is that for every $100 that the bank gives you, over the span of a year, you will pay them back $12.68 in interest. Okay?
Okay, so 112, right?
112.68.
Yes.
Not to be confused with, this deceptively says that you are actually only paying the bank $12 in interest. But when we take into account periodic compounding, monthly compounding, you're actually paying the bank $12.68 in interest. This doesn't seem like a lot of money.
And over
but
here, I'm paying them $112.42.
Yes, over there.
Over.
But,
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is the EAR same thing as APR? Annual
No,
percentage
but the
rate?
APR is more like the IOY, right?
The nominal?
I just,
APR is the comment. Let's
That's a finance.
look this up.
That's what I was saying, that the APR equals the EAR.
That's what I'm asking. Same question.
I didn't have the answer to this one prepared. Annual percentage rate, annual percentage yield are synonyms. Get out of here.
Cause that's what banks, like, whenever you go to the bank, like, you ever see
It says
advertising?
APR. My instinct is to say yes, but I don't want to misspeak.
If you're telling me you're compounding the
What is
interest
that on your
annually
phone?
for 12%, and the effective annual rate is 12%, shouldn't that be the same thing as opposed to saying you're compounding the interest here daily, or semi-monthly, or semi-whatever, so that would be a different
Percentage
EAR.
rate versus just
Yeah, I mean, you see this, you
What
work
I'm
with
thinking
the,
is, I'm actually thinking that the APR is more like the nominal rate.
but we're
Be
talking
careful,
about
guys, because there's a lot of words
Well,
thrown around in finance for the same concept.
the compounding though, we're talking about as far as how much you're gonna
Yeah, but
compound.
you have a
12%.
compound every
So
month,
I'm getting that the
and
two are the
rate
same
is
thing, that the
12.
APR is the EAR.
Based just on compounding, but you can say if you're quoting me as far as 12%, but it's the compounding it monthly, then the EAR will be different because you're compounding
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. That's what you said in the beginning of the class, that's why they were forced to expose that information because they were misleading.
12% is not an APR,
No.
12% is not an EAR.
No, no.
12% is the nominal rate,
Nominal rate.
okay? 12.68% is the APR or the AER,
Yes.
depending on which side of the coin you're looking at. When you're talking about just,
Well,
anyway, Yeah.
When they,
what's that?
the quote with the credit cards, you can go online right now and quote, what do they quote you as far as credit cards, or mortgage here in this case, if we're to go online? Or do they give us an APR? Is that what they're giving us, or they're giving us something else?
It depends, I mean,
Every
I don't know.
credit card is different, some compound monthly, some compound bi-weekly.
They have to disclose the EAR/APR, and they have to do it sort of in boldface so everyone sees it, but it's not necessarily gonna be the rate. When the bank says that I can give you a rate of 12%, when you go in and talk to them and ask for a mortgage, it's gonna be the nominal rate.
Okay.
From my experience with banks. And then to figure out the actual APR, EAR, you can get this. What's that?
Just for argument's sake.
That's too high for a mortgage
Just
rate.
so-
No,
This is coming from Big Talk's class.
Okay.
And so, this actually has.
3 to 4. like-
Okay, yeah, so this has the EAR formula as the top number in the EAR. Okay, the top 12 in that, right there, that is the APR, according to this.
Oh, doctor.
Sorry.
Okay, I'll let you guys interpret it. I don't know, you can go online and find an answer to that. I don't have an answer prepared off the fly. It's a pretty simple question. Or you can trust Jackson and Dr. Leetoff. One of the many problems with our profession is that there's a million words thrown around for the same thing. Sometimes people don't know how to use them. So it's a problem.
So you were saying, what, sir, as far as the, after 10 years, 12.5%?
Okay, so if you only hold a loan for 10 years, if you sell the house in 10 years, have to get the loan paid off, then you're actually paying 12.52%
Still good.
per year. Yes, but it's still better than the 12.68. Okay? Let's take this a step further. So I'm gonna erase everything now because you've had plenty of time to argue it.
So we would have to hold the property for at least 15 years to make it worth our while.
Not at all. So this is the rate that you get without any points.
Mm-hmm.
If you hold the property for 10 years, according to that book,
It's 12.52.
yes, 12.52 is still less than 12.68. So you still get a better rate,
Okay.
right?
So we want this number to be larger than that because this is our, we'll let it go.
So you as a borrower need to figure out in which scenario can I pay the least amount of money to the bank. Okay? One way of expressing that is which situation gives me the lowest effective annual rate. We realized at the beginning of the class that we can't trust the nominal rate because we had 11.5 nominal rate, which was actually higher than the 12 nominal rate, once you figured out daily compounding instead of annual compounding. Okay? Here, we've abstracted from that, and we're working in monthly compounding, and we're comparing this EAR from the no point scenario to the EAR from the point scenario. So if you hold the loan for 30 years, under the point scenario, your EAR is 12.42%. If you hold this loan for 30 years, or 15 years, or 10 years, it's still 12.68%. As you hold the loan for less amount of time, in the point scenario, you are still paying this present value of $2,000 cost, but you are foregoing the benefits which accrue to you later on from the lower interest rate. So if you hold a loan for 10 years, your rate jumps up to 12.52. But 12.52 is still lower than 12.68. So you would still opt to get this loan if you plan on holding it for 10 years instead of the full 30. Did you get that last part, Sam? That seemed to be.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it, but you just said, okay, ground zero. You said 12.68%, right? That's if we don't use the point system,
Yes.
right? That's truly what we're paying on this loan. Doesn't matter how long we hold it.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. 12.42% is what we're gonna the total interest we're paying on this loan if it's held to maturity at 30 years.
Exactly.
Right. Then at 10 years, you're saying it's gonna increase because of the 12.42% is not gonna all be, you're not gonna use all of it because you only went for 10 years at 12.52, right? But that number is still less than 12.68, so you'd still be getting a better deal even if you held it to only 10 years.
That's it. I could have said any better than you.
That's what I said, and you told me no in the beginning.
And so I heard that you were saying it the other way. I'm sorry. Maybe I misinterpreted. I'm sorry. The way you got it right now is correct. I'm sorry if I misinterpreted what you said, Sam. Okay. Let's move on with the second part of this problem. Or third. So, what about this magic number, 5 years? And Taylor, if I could answer your question, I can tell you exactly why it's magic, but alas, I can't. But let's just do the calculation for 5 years. How do you figure out what your EAR is if you hold a loan for 5 years? Okay? So, in this case, we keep the payments we're actually making, because that doesn't change. So, payment equals negative 990 plus 0.29, right? And this is the point scenario. You guys with me? Okay. The present value, we keep at 100,000. So we're going back to the first present value for the first step of this problem. It's going to be another multi-part problem. I over y is 11.5 over 12%. Very familiar to us.
This is the point sum?
Yes, we're still working in the point scenario here. Here the only difference is what we keep the loan to, okay? So let's now assume that we keep the loan to n equals, with 5 years it's going to be 60. 5 times 12 is 60. We're holding it for 5 years, okay? The first step of this problem is going to answer the question of what balance, what principal balance is left on your loan if you keep it to 5 years. Okay? Let me write that up. So, part 1, what is the principal? Okay? And so we get that by figuring out the future value in this scenario. Can we get the future value?
Yes.
What is it?
44, 223, 03.
Really? Yeah, it should be a lot closer to that.
And negative 97,424.
What's, just for sake of completeness?
75 cents.
Cool. Okay, so what we determined is if we borrow $100,000 and make these constant payments under this percentage rate for 60 periods, we will still owe the bank $97,000, $424.75. Okay? If we decide to prepay the loan on that day, this is going to be the principal balance outstanding to the bank. And when we go over the amortization table, we're going to see exactly why. So, the second part of the question asks, okay? Given that we still have to pay the bank back this, and assuming we pay it back at the end of month 60, what was the true EAR that we faced during this loan? Okay? So, we start with this, and now we have to consider, oh no, I'm sorry, we still consider the n equals 60. Payment hasn't changed. But here, we factor in the points, because we want to factor in the true cost to us, and not just the interest payment, or the future value left. So, And we need to solve for our I over Y. What's that? It is very, yeah, this is a very, very multi-step problem. But fortunately, these are gonna be the calculations you're actually facing if you're actually buy a house someday. So somewhat relevant to know. Or you can just get a financial planner and he'll tell you what to do. So once we solve for this problem, what is our I over Y?
So in the first part, we were solving for future value.
Yes, outstanding balance. 1.033, that's our, yes. 1.033.
2 years. Oh, yeah, times
Okay.
12.
Yes, so this is our I over Y to get our annual rate. So just our I equals 12 point, what is it, 72 or something?
12.0398.
Oh, okay, yes, sorry. 398. So we can already see from here that this nominal rate is gonna be more than the other nominal rate, right? So if we're just comparing nominal rates, we can already see that we're gonna be worse off. But let's take it to completion and figure out what our EAR is under this scenario. Okay?
The 12.03 is in percentage form, correct?
Yes, yes.
Take completion and do what now?
Figure out the EAR.
For which one?
So this is not our EAR. Yep. So part 3 is,
This is
1.032.
okay, so how do we do that?
12.4.
Does everyone understand why I'm using this formula? And where I got the inputs for this formula? So this 1.0033 comes from here. Okay?
That's 12.73.
And you're doing 12 because of the months and not 60?
Yes. So we're bringing it into annual terms. I mean, if I wanted to, I think I could give you a question of what's your 5-year effective annual rate, but when people say annual rate, effective annual rate, they imply
Okay.
annual rate. Yes, annual rate.
Is it, 0.010033?
Yes, it absolutely is. Thank you.
.01033.
You got that, right?
Yeah.
Final answer. 1272, 1273, yeah. So,
Why is your rate greater though?
what's that?
Why is it greater than?
Why is your rate greater? That's a great question. Who can explain to him why this rate is greater? Sam
Because
can.
you're not being compensated for holding the loan to maturity throughout the whole duration. That's why as you cut it off shorter, the price of the interest increases. That's why we would have to hold it to 7 years at least.
5 years is the magic number. They say that